Students are sometimes surprised to learn that the President of the United States is not actually elected by the people, but is rather chosen through a complicated process mediated through an institutional structure known as the Electoral College. In this video, we're going to explore the Electoral College, examine the reasons for its existence, and consider some of the benefits and drawbacks of that system. The Electoral College as it functions in the United States today is a product both of the historical circumstances and deliberate design choices made by the framers of the Constitution. Its origins are rooted in broader debates of the Constitutional Convention of 1787, where representatives grappled with how to design a new system of governance that balanced federal and state powers and addressed their concerns about direct democracy. Drawing from classical examples and recent experiences like Shays' Rebellion, the founders believed that the masses could be prone to manipulation, impulsiveness, or be swayed by demagogues. A buffer between popular sentiment and the selection of the president was seen as a safeguard against potential pitfalls of direct popular election. The United States was also emerging from the Articles of Confederation and was still a collection of sovereign states with distinct interests, and the small states worried that a direct popular vote would diminish their influence in presidential elections compared to larger states. The Electoral College was a compromise that allowed all states to have a role in the selection of the president proportional to their representation in Congress. The Electoral College indirectly benefited the southern slaveholding states. While slaves couldn't vote, they were counted as 3/5 of a person for purposes of congressional representation due to the 3/5 compromise. This inflated the South's representation in the House of Representatives and, by extension, in the Electoral College, even though a large proportion of their population, the enslaved individuals themselves, had no political rights. The late 18th century also posed significant logistical challenges to organizing a nationwide election. Travel and communication were slow, and there was no national media to speak of. Many framers doubted the feasibility of a nationwide political campaign or believed that most citizens would be unfamiliar with the candidates outside of their home state. The Electoral College was seen as a way to allow local decisions that would culminate in the selection of the president. And finally, the framers considered other methods for selecting the president, including election by Congress, election by state legislatures, and direct popular vote. However, each had its detractors. Election by Congress might make the president too beholden to the legislature, undermining the separation of powers. Direct election raised the fears of mob rule. And so the Electoral College emerged as a compromise solution to balance these various concerns. Article 2, Section 1, as modified by the 12th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, outlines the nature and function of the Electoral College, providing that each state shall appoint in a manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors equal to the whole number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled in the Congress. Under the terms outlined in the Constitution, the electors then meet in their various respective states and cast a vote for president and vice president. Those votes are transmitted to the Congress, which is officially charged with certifying election results. The candidates for president and vice president winning a majority of the votes in the Electoral College are elected to office. The mechanics of the Electoral College are fairly straightforward. There are a total of 538 electors, which is based on the total number of members in Congress, 435 representatives and 100 senators, plus 3 electors from Washington, D.C., provided for by the 23rd Amendment ratified in 1961. Each state is allocated a number of electors equal to its total representation in Congress, with 1 elector for each representative and 1 for each senator. The allocation of electors is based on the state's total population as determined by the census. This means that states with larger populations will have more electors, while smaller states will have fewer. For example, California has 52 representatives and 2 senators, so it has 54 electors, while Wyoming has just 1 representative and 2 senators, so it has 3 electors. Electors are chosen by the political parties of each state. Parties typically select loyal and trusted party members to serve as electors. The actual method for selecting electors varies from state to state, but in most cases, electors are nominated and pledged to vote for the party's candidate if that candidate wins the state's popular vote. While the presidential election occurs on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November, the Electoral College vote takes place about 5 to 6 weeks after that, occurring on the first Monday after the second Wednesday in December following the presidential election. On this day, electors gather in their respective state capitals to cast their votes for president and vice president. The Constitution originally provided that the candidate receiving the most votes in the Electoral College would be president, and the candidate receiving the second most votes would be the vice president. But after controversial elections in 1800 and 1804, which saw rival political parties winning the two offices, the 12th Amendment was adopted, changing the process to cast separate votes for each office. After the electors cast their vote, the next step is the certification of the Electoral College vote by Congress. The newly elected Congress, which convenes on January 3rd of the following year, meets in joint session on January 6th to count and certify the electoral votes. The President of the Senate, who is also Vice President of the United States, presides over the joint session and opens the sealed envelopes containing the electoral votes from each state. Congress then tallies the votes, and the candidate who receives at least 270 electoral votes out of the 538 total is declared president-elect. In the event of any objections to the electoral votes of a particular state, both the House of Representatives and the Senate would separately debate and vote on the objection before the electoral vote continues. Each state can decide how to allocate its electors. While most states use a winner-take-all system where the candidate that receives the most votes in the state wins all of that state electors, Nebraska and Maine use a slightly different system. In those states, the state allocates its electors at the congressional district level, with the candidate receiving the most votes in a district winning that district's electoral college vote. The candidate that wins the statewide popular vote receives an additional 2 at-large votes in the electoral college. The winner-take-all system used by most states creates a system where some states are generally considered reliably in the camp of one party or another, the red states and blue states as they're often described. But a handful of states are highly competitive, moving back and forth depending upon the election. Often these are referred to as swing states or battleground states, and in recent electoral cycles, these have generally included Arizona, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. But this also breeds a degree of neglect for non-battleground states or swing states. In a close election, no candidate is going to waste time and energy campaigning in states like California or Illinois, which are reliably Democratic, or Ohio or Wyoming, which are reliably Republican. While they might visit such states for fundraising, they're unlikely to spend any real-time campaigning there. There are also other criticisms of the Electoral College system. There are historical instances in which the winner of the popular vote in the country was not elected president, a phenomenon usually called electoral mismatch. Indeed, this has happened 5 times in U.S. history. In the election of 1824, 4 candidates ran for the presidency, including John Quincy Adams, Andrew Jackson, William Crawford, and Henry Clay. Andrew Jackson won the popular vote and received the most electoral votes, but did not secure the necessary majority to win the Electoral College. As a result, the election was decided by the House of Representatives in what became known as the corrupt bargain. It chose John Quincy Adams as the winner, making him the 6th President of the United States. In the election of 1876, Rutherford B. Hayes, the Republican candidate, faced off against Samuel J. Tilden, the Democratic candidate. Tilden won the popular vote by a narrow margin, but there were disputes over the electoral votes of several states, including Florida, Louisiana, South Carolina, and Oregon. A special electoral commission was established to resolve the dispute, and it ultimately awarded the disputed electoral votes to Hayes, making him the winner of the presidency. In the election of 1888, Grover Cleveland, the Democratic incumbent president, ran for re-election against Benjamin Harrison, the Republican candidate. Cleveland won the popular vote but lost the Electoral College to Harrison, who secured a majority of electoral votes and became the 23rd President of the United States. In the election of 2000, George W. Bush, the Republican candidate, faced Al Gore, the Democratic candidate. Gore won the popular vote by over 500,000 votes nationwide, but the electoral vote count in Florida became highly contested. The U.S. Supreme Court ultimately ruled in favor of Bush, effectively granting him Florida's Electoral College votes and securing the victory in the Electoral College for him, making Bush the 43rd President of the United States. And in the election of 2016, Donald Trump, the Republican candidate, faced Hillary Clinton, the Democratic candidate. Trump won the Electoral College and therefore the presidency, but Clinton won the popular vote by a margin of nearly 3 million votes. Most of these are examples of Electoral College mismatch, where the winner of the popular vote fails to win the most votes in the Electoral College. But there are also concerns about the potential impact of faithless electors, who are electors pledged to vote for one candidate, but who abstain or vote for another candidate altogether. Because the political parties choose their own electors, it's a fairly rare occurrence, and most electors fulfill their pledge to vote for their respective candidates. But in very close elections, sometimes decided by just a couple of votes in the Electoral College, it would be possible for a small number of faithless electors to change the outcome of an election. Finally, the potential for no winning candidate to emerge from the Electoral College process is also a concern. This could happen either because of a tie in votes or because a third-party candidate splits the votes, leading to no one receiving the required 270 votes in the college. According to the Constitution, the contested election would then be sent to the Congress for resolution. If this happens, the House of Representatives would decide the presidency and the Senate would decide the vice presidency. In the House, each state would receive a single vote, meaning the delegation would have to come to agreement on how to allocate its vote, most likely by party line votes. To be elected, a candidate would need to receive a majority of the state delegation votes, or 26 of the 50 votes available in the chamber. In the Senate, each senator would receive a single vote for vice president, with the candidate needing a majority of the vote to be elected. The incumbent vice president would cast the tie-breaking vote should the Senate be deadlocked. And if the House can't reach agreement before Inauguration Day on January 20th, the vice president-elect would serve as the acting president until the House reached a decision. If the Senate fails to reach a majority vote for vice president by Inauguration Day, the elected president nominates an individual to serve as vice president, subject to confirmation by a majority vote in both the House and the Senate. In modern times, due to the winner-take-all system used by most states and the existence of third-party candidates, the likelihood of no candidate winning a majority vote in the Electoral College or a tie in the Electoral College is quite low, though it remains a constitutional contingency. But the process has actually been used once following the contested election of 1824. Given these criticisms, several alternatives to the Electoral College system have been proposed. The first, and perhaps the most obvious, it would be the simple direct election of the president. In a direct popular vote system, the president would be elected solely based on the nationwide popular vote count without any intermediary of electoral votes or state boundaries. The candidate who receives the most votes nationwide would become the president. However, this would be a dramatic change, significantly weakening the power of small states and expanding the power of large ones. It would also require amending the U.S. Constitution and is therefore highly unlikely to happen. A second proposal would be to have all states allocate their Electoral College votes in the same manner that Nebraska and Maine currently do. It's often called the congressional district method. Under the system, votes would be allocated to the winner of each congressional district, with the state's 2 at-large votes given to the candidate that places first in the statewide popular vote. While this would not require a constitutional amendment to do, it would dramatically shift the nature of presidential campaigns, moving them to a much more local level. It would also encourage greater gerrymandering of electoral districts. Because of this, I think that this reform is also highly unlikely. But perhaps the most likely reform would be the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, a proposed agreement among several states to award all of their Electoral College votes to the winner of the national popular vote rather than to the winner of the state's popular vote. States that join the compact commit to allocate their votes to the candidate that receives the most votes nationally, regardless of who wins their state. The compact only goes into effect once states representing at least 270 electoral votes, a majority, join it. And it has the advantage of not requiring a constitutional amendment to implement. To date, 17 states representing a total of 205 electoral votes have adopted the compact, but the momentum for reform appears largely to be confined to blue states, suggesting the compact is unlikely to be adopted in the near future. But that's it for now. Please leave any questions you have in the comment section below, and thanks for watching.